During the Clone Wars, Kamino had made over 1 million clone troopers with another 5 million on order from the Republic. Now, that's a lot of soldiers, and the Grand Army of the Republic was massive by the end of the war. Today we'll take a look at what exactly happened to the Clone Army after the Clone Wars. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So with Bad Batch, which is now just a few months away, certain to tell the story of the clones following the war, I figured we could take a look today at what we know so far about what happened with the clone troopers after the war. So as I mentioned, Tipoca City had manufactured at least 1.2 million clone troopers by the end of the war, and the Republic had already ordered another 5 million at some point during the conflict. So there were a lot of clone troopers already fully mature and in combat, and probably way more in development. So what exactly happened to all of these living, breathing beings following the end of the conflict? Well, during the conflict, they had served the Republic loyally, fighting on battlefields across the galaxy. And with the declaration of Order 66 and the shutdown order for the droid army, hostilities with the Confederacy of Independent Systems basically stopped. Luckily for the members of the Republic military, the Empire didn't really have any plans to downsize their military. So, at the start of the reign of the Galactic Empire, many of the clone troopers just simply became Imperial soldiers, serving mostly in the Imperial Stormtrooper Corps, which in a lot of ways was the successor organization to the Grand Army of the Republic. Many of the early Stormtroopers actually were just clone troopers. You see, in order to produce the clones quickly, the Kaminoans had to make some modifications to allow for a faster growth. This meant that the clone's life cycle was basically shortened by about 50%. So, at 10, a clone would have the body of a 20-year-old. That meant that the clones aged twice as fast. A year for everyone else was 2 years for the clones. So their combat effectiveness quickly began deteriorating. Their effectiveness and ability to fight came into question. And with the Emperor looking at a clone army and seeing some particular vulnerabilities, for example, with an entire army that's genetically identical, a biological weapon could be devastating against your forces, the decision was made ultimately to begin transitioning the Imperial military over to a recruit-based system where most of the Imperial stormtroopers were recruits and not clones. This system meant that many of the clones who had been serving the Republic had to basically leave the military. As they were phased out as they became too old to fight, many of them tried to enter civilian work. However, having spent their lives and been bred for combat, it was likely very difficult. Basically, from birth, all they had known was military service. So suddenly being free and able to make their own destiny in the galaxy could have been rather jarring. That's why I'm not surprised we see clone troopers serving as things like bounty hunters following their retirement. It's the closest thing to military service the private sector has. With the Clone Wars being the last major galactic war, their experience during the war was invaluable. The fact that most of the clones had combat experience made them invaluable advisors to anyone building a military force. Basically, you could bring a clone on and they could take the knowledge that they gained from fighting in this galactic war and do the best they could to convey it to your new recruits. We see this done not just in the private sector, but in the Imperial military as well. In the early days, a lot of instructors for new Imperial cadets were former clone troopers. However, we do know that that's not the case universally. We know that some clone troopers did attempt to go and live relatively normal lives, and some of them were likely fairly successful. But while some attempted to live normal lives, others would go into a reclusive state, deciding to live on their own and be away from the galaxy that they'd been serving their entire life. In a way, we kind of see this with Rex and the other clone troopers that we see in Rebels. They're living on their own on a desert world, basically separate from the rest of the galaxy. So the clone troopers themselves scattered across the galaxy and filled a variety of different roles, from bounty hunters to sort of reclusive individuals. But what exactly happened to all the equipment and material built for the ground forces of the Grand Army of the Republic? A lot of it went the way of the rest of the Republic military material. We see, for example, in the opening of Jedi Fallen Order that there is a lot of Republic ground equipment there among the Venators being dismantled. We see things like LAAT gunships, and I think we even see an ATTE in there somewhere. This doesn't really surprise me. This equipment has to go somewhere, and it's all sort of being phased out for newer Imperial equipment. And while I'm sure some of this equipment ended up either in the private sector or serving small local defense fleets, most of it would have been retired and sent to the scrapyard. But the Grand Army of the Republic was a massive military institution, and its relatively quick transformation into the military of the Galactic Empire brings up some very interesting predicaments, things like what to do with the massive number of clone troopers or the massive mountains of equipment. I'm very interested to see how the Bad Batch tells tells the story and exactly what the Bad Batch shows us about the transition from the Republic military to the Imperial military. But the clone troopers weren't the only aspects of the Republic military to go through a change immediately following the war. The Republic Navy also went through an incredible change to transition to the Imperial Navy. If you want to learn more about what happened to the Republic Navy following the war, I have an entire video on that, and I'll leave a link up here to that. And I want you to let me know what you think most clone troopers would have done following the end of their service to the Imperial military. Do you think they would have gone into the private sector serving as mercenaries, or do you think they're more likely to stick around as advisors and try to help out the Imperial military as much as possible? And last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.